I'm the next speaker, and I'm presenting myself. I'm Annette Finley-Croswhite, and I'm a professor of history at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia. I am technically a French historian. I work on political and religious violence. Right now I have a project on tuberculosis in World War II. My paper is entitled Hidden Histories, Pregnant Bodies, Gynecology, and Genocide. I think you'll see Beverly and I really didn't talk to each other ahead of time, but we have some of the same examples and kind of a very different orientation. So, atrocities involving assault on pregnant women, sterilization, forced abortion, infanticide, and death in utero reflect specific gendered violence meted out to Jewish women during the Holocaust. The literature exploring the Nazi attack on Jewish wombs, however, is underdeveloped, especially in scholarship not specifically focused on women's studies, and estimates for Jewish lives aborted under duress, killed at birth, shot or gassed in utero have never been undertaken. Jewish law further complicates the discussion of pregnancy and Holocaust because it subordinates the fetus to the mother and assigns no identity to the child before its head crowns in the birth canal, even while disapproving of causing deliberate harm to the fetus. Evidence exists showing that the Nazi assault on Jewish reproduction involved targeting pregnant women, meaning that Jewish women endured abortions as a form of self-preservation, and Jewish health care specialists performed abortions in order to save Jewish women's lives. This paper explores the assault on the Jewish pregnant body in Eastern Europe and the Balkans and attempts some statistical analysis of deaths in utero or killed at birth. It identifies the Jewish womb as a Holocaust landscape, another kind of killing field where the final solution was carried out. Pregnant women during the Holocaust experienced a specific kind of horror that is not well recognized in standard Holocaust literature. In the longer version of this paper, I explain that more. Beverly Chalmers articulates that the direct means of killing Jews by bullets, starvation, disease, gas chambers, or torture are exhaustively covered in Holocaust literature, but the same cannot be said for those indirect ways that she talked about that the Nazis pursued to eliminate Jewish reproductive lives. These indirect means targeted the Jewish womb in a number of ways, the sterilization T4 projects of the 1930s and the sterilization experiments in the camps in the 1940s being just two examples, revealed further in the wide range of consequences pregnant women experienced during the Holocaust that sent some straight to the gas chambers or forced others to abort in order to save their lives in the camps, or even the lives of their families in the ghetto or in hiding, in the ghettos or in hiding. To annihilate the Jewish people, it was necessary for the final solution to emphasize an attack on the embodiment of Israel revealed in the womb of the Jewish mother. The womb thus became a killing field, an interior landscape where Jewish life was being formed, and its destruction not only created another bloody battleground on which the Holocaust was fought, but also affected the demographic realities of Jewish people for generations to come. Adolf Eichmann, after all, believed that by destroying all Jewry in the East, world Jewry in general would never recover. Abortion in Jewish law is a controversial matter since Judaism recognizes the sanctity of life, and as such, most Orthodox rabbis have condemned abortion as murder, especially in the context of aborting an unwanted child. This stance is complicated, however, by the fact that Jewish law does not identify a fetus as a living being until it is born. It is a potential life and thus should not be harmed, although exceptions are possible. As such, halakha recognizes the legitimacy of abortion if the fetus threatens the life of the mother. The 2nd century code of law known as the Mishnah subordinates the fetus to the mother and perceives the fetus as a pursuer, or one that could, in certain instances, pursue the mother and threaten her life. This interpretation is the view Maimonides held in articulating that the life of the mother takes precedence over the life of the fetus. Rachel Bial states, Halakha does recognize as a fundamental principle the right of a mother to protect her life by abortion. It is part of the right and self-duty of self-preservation, end quote. This understanding is particularly relevant to the Holocaust when the pregnant body marked Jewish women for destruction, when the unborn child, through no fault of its own, was cast in the role of the pursuer, although one that did not instigate its mother's plight. During the Holocaust, victims asked rabbis a multitude of legal questions, and the rabbis in turn applied a certain amount of leniency in their interpretations, given the unusual situations the Holocaust created. Abortion became a critical matter for rabbinical thought in the Warsaw Ghetto, for example, in November of 1941, when the SS mandated the forced termination of Jewish pregnancies. In the Balkan regions in February of 1942, an SS decree was published forbidding all Jewish births, a crime punishable by death, often for the entire family of the pregnant woman. Such rulings were amplified on 8 September 1942 when the Germans declared that in the Kovno ghetto, any woman perceived to be pregnant would be killed on sight. In this context, Rabbi Ephraim Oshry was queried about abortion. He states, quote, I was asked about a woman who became pregnant in the ghetto, whether it is permissible for her to abort. And I have the longer quotes on the slide here. Rabbi Oshry concluded that abortion was appropriate in such cases. Perhaps he had been influenced by the fact that one day in front of the hospital in the Kovno ghetto, he had watched a German soldier target a pregnant woman and shoot her dead. It's impossible to know how many abortions were performed during the Holocaust, but certainly thousands and thousands, and testimonial archives often reference themes of pregnancy and abortion. In Kovno, Shavli, and Vilna in Lithuania, and Riga in Latvia, ghetto records indicate that not only were pregnant women encouraged to have abortions, but the SS threatened obstetricians if they refused to perform them. Scholar Miriam Ofer comments on Shavli, quote, after the decree had been proclaimed, abortions took place in the ghetto almost every day, end quote. In Kovno, beginning in early 1942, staff gynecologists performed approximately 50 abortions a month. In the Vilno ghetto, hospital records indicate that 50 to 60% of the 420 women admitted to the gynecological ward in 1942 were seen for abortions. Raphael Zadowski, a doctor who worked in the hospital at the time, recounted, quote, I remember cases of women in the last months of pregnancy when the ghetto police would bring in by force to the hospital in order to terminate the pregnancy, end quote. Ruth Freudenheimer, who later became Foster, was a German Jew deported to the Riga ghetto, where she worked in the ghetto hospital and saw numerous abortions performed, almost all by cesarean section. She recollects that she knew of only one child born during that time in the hospital, a boy named Ben Ghetto, whom the SS killed. Foster explained that in Riga, one German Jewish gynecologist perfected the procedure of extracting fetuses using forceps so as not to leave a scar and so that the woman could return to work more easily. One might argue that just as Nazi doctors experimented on Jewish bodies in the camps with diseases like typhus, Nazi genocidal policy also stimulated abortion epidemics that made Jewish pregnancies unsustainable. Nazi directives were never consistent, however, and changes of protocol and leadership added to the confusion. In Theresienstadt, just as in Kovno and elsewhere, births were prohibited and abortions mandatory. Yet Ruth Elias, who you've heard already, recounts that in 1943, a regulation was passed that prohibited all abortions in Theresienstadt, and doctors caught performing them were subject to immediate deportation. It's plausible that the change in strategy later in the war was simply meant to hasten deportation of pregnant women to camps like Auschwitz, where they would be identified as pregnant and gassed on arrival. The new ruling thus denied pregnant women life-saving abortions. Gisela Perl, the Czech gynecologist who produced a post-Holocaust memoir, recounted aspects of the thousands of abortions she performed while in Auschwitz, and she offers vivid testimony to the, quote, special treatment pregnant women received in the camp. As the largest of the concentration extermination camps, Auschwitz-Birkenau had a constant supply of pregnant women who either faced extermination, experimentation, sterilization, abortion, or delivery. Stanisława Leszczyńska, a Polish midwife who spent 2 years at the camp, stated, quote, among the numerous transports of women that arrived at the camp, there was no shortage of pregnant women. Many were able to hide their pregnancies and abort or deliver. Barracks became abortion clinics and maternity wards where doctors and midwives and others with birthing knowledge faced difficult ethical challenges in trying to save Jewish lives. Dr. Pearl, a Holocaust victim herself, wrote, quote, it was up to me to save the life of the mothers if there was no other way than by destroying the life of the unborn children, end quote. In the, quote, dark corners of the camp, end quote, in the hospital blocks and sometimes on the concrete channels that connected the cold fireboxes on either end of the barracks, Jewish wombs were manipulated so that the taking of the potential lives, the pursuers, in the Holocaust sense, protected and or saved the lives of the mothers. In this context, many children born live were quickly killed, most often without the mother's knowledge. Writing in April of 1944, Sarah Numberg-Schittek, a teacher and journalist from Lublin deported to Auschwitz, explains, quote, in the hospital block, it is impossible to conceal the birth of a child from the Germans. Our procedure now is to kill the baby after birth in such a way so that the mother doesn't know about it. Mothers lost their babies in other cruel ways as well, since Auschwitz was also a medical experimentation camp where Dr. Mengele had a particular interest in pregnant women. Ruth Elias, mentioned above, tells of delivering a baby girl in the hospital whom Mengele planned to watch starve to death. And with the help of a dentist, she secured morphine to take the child's life. In the final days at Auschwitz, orders came from Berlin that slowed or stopped the gassing of pregnant women. A Polish Jew named Gina Adelman reported that as a result, she found herself in a hospital block with at least 50 other pregnant women. Many were given abortions before being sent off on transports as the Germans prepared to abandon Auschwitz. Adelman delivered her son on 10 January 1945, and he died on 27 January, the day the camp was liberated. But she states, quote, I know for a fact of the children born at this time, not one is alive, end quote. It is impossible to provide a precise accounting of the number of pregnant women who were sent to death in the camps or shot by Einsatzgruppen or other Germans and their collaborators, or gave birth in the ghettos, camps, forest, or in hiding, or aborted a child and either survived the war or did not. In the case of survivors, we have no way of knowing how many Jewish women aborted or gave birth during the war and never spoke of the experience again. To get a sense of the magnitude of this form of genocide, however, we can consider the number of births that would have occurred in a population of 6 million, the figure given for the number of Jewish deaths in the Holocaust. Measuring natality as the relationship between the number of pregnant women in any population involves determining the number of births per 1,000, and that's birth per /population times 1,000 of the mid-year population, and recognizing that 3/4 of women who give birth during a 12-month period are pregnant. In 1938, birth rates in Nazi-occupied countries ranged from a low of 13.9 births per 1,000 in the population in Austria to 37.5 in Russia. If we use then 15 to 30 as a plausible range, this implies to 90,000 to 180,000 births would have occurred in a year, and at any given moment in time, 67,500 to 135,000 females would have been pregnant. Even so, not all pregnant women died in the Holocaust, especially since abortions were pursued to save lives. So it might be best to base calculations on the pre-war Jewish population of 9.5 million. In this case, if we use 15 to 30 again as a plausible range, this implies that 142,500 to 285,000 births would have occurred in a year, and at any given moment in time, 106,875 to 213,750 females would have been pregnant. Thus, even allowing for lower rates of pregnancy during wartime, it would be unlikely that the number of lives lost in utero or killed at birth during the Holocaust would have been lower than 60,000 and could have easily been over 100,000 in the context of the pre-war population figure. To come up with these figures in the math, I worked with George Otler, who heads a Population Studies Institute at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. Questions about the moral permissibility of abortion, whether within Haqqaic law or revealed more broadly within medical ethics and societal debates on abortion in general, have hindered analytical exploration of Jewish women's experiences with pregnancy during the Holocaust. Dr. Aaron Pick, a respected doctor in the Shavli ghetto in Lithuania, reacted with horror to the 5 February 1942 ban on births in the ghetto. He recorded in his diary, quote, "The world has never before heard such a decree and will never forget it," end quote. In fact, the world not only forgot the decree, but in large measure has never fully integrated the Nazi assault on Jewish wombs into the larger Holocaust narrative. The Jewish womb is a Holocaust wasteland that is vast and empty, even though it encompasses a collection of a potential 100,000 births in utero, aborted fetuses, and/or babies who lived at most a few days. Numbers never included in official Holocaust statistics, but sources of intense pain to the mothers who experienced brutal mental and physical torture and so often death, the healthcare workers who faced unimaginable decisions while attempting to save women's lives, and the rabbis who subsequently confronted enormous ethical challenges created uniquely by the horror of the Holocaust. Obstetrical genocide was a key component of the final solution. This paper calls for greater acknowledgement of its impact. Pregnant women faced grim decisions during the Holocaust, casting some into the role of resistors as they opted for abortion or infanticide as strategies of survival for themselves and/or their families. Survival testimony indicates that for many Jewish women, remembering these pregnancies and abortions was unbearable. The recollections were for them, quote, their most difficult memories, end quote. A recent study of survivors revealed that depression and anxiety were greater in female survivors. One can hypothesize this might be especially true for survivors who experienced abortions, miscarriages, or infant death during the Holocaust. Other Jewish mothers rejected the idea of harming their fetuses, but were then caught by the Nazi assault on female reproduction nevertheless. Many women in Western Europe, for example, chose deportation in order to avoid abortion, only to be sent into the gas chambers when they arrived in the East. By avoiding abortion and infanticide discussions, by deeming them unbearable, we consign the Holocaust pregnancies to oblivion, which is exactly what the Nazis wanted, and we dishonor Jewish mothers in the process who fought for survival. Recognizing the sheer magnitude of the scale of the Nazi assault on pregnant Jewish women, as discussed in this paper, should help scholars better understand the epidemics of abortion, deaths in utero, and infanticide the Nazi racist agenda stimulated during the Holocaust, and better recognize the interior landscape of the Jewish womb as a crucial site of Holocaust destruction. Thank you.